Kraz, I wanted to ask you, like, what is still on your bucket list, man? I mean, you've played with so many, the hippest cats. You've been a band leader. I'm just curious about outside of your own band, like, do you have any like real things that you still are desiring, or who to play with?
That's a great question. I think about that a lot. I think that the most important thing is just being happy. It sounds so simple, but it's one of those things where my happiness revolves around, the combination of my family being happy and me being healthy and having a good amount of creative output,
Hmm.
and I think that so it's quite simple, and then it gets more complex the more you dig, in. But I'm thankful for, gratitude is so important in being happy, because I think a lot of times I've been caught up, and musicians will get caught up in a comparison. You
Oh,
compare yourself to other people, and I think that's something that's being magnified in the internet age, that like it's all about, today the Spotify Wrapped comes out, and
yeah.
there's 500 million, and some people are like, hey, I got 1,000, and I got 200, and I got 5 million, and it's just like it really, it's so much, the internet allows you to show these tiny little spurts of greatness. Um, there's a lot of cool things about having this kind of extra layer that you you get to have a magnifying glass, kind of into the world of these artists, which is fascinating, but it also, it can be curated and be misleading. So I guess that all of that to say that, music is different to everyone. I write a song, and everyone hears it a different way. So there is no such thing as like catering to a particular audience, really. And that's something that took me a while to figure out. Is like I need to make music that makes me happy, and then if it as it flows out to the world, the more happiness it brings other people, the better.
dude,
But
you're
it,
making, I
you,
mean, just
you know,
smiling ear to ear, like listening. I mean, can you talk about, I remember, I think, well, I mean, it was one of those revelations when I guess Ayrto was telling me about, he has to please himself before he can please the audience.
yeah,
And musically, I mean, was there a kind of a demarcation point for you when you recognize that instead of trying to cater to this group or this genre, just do what you dig, and if you're happy, then I remember
yeah,
it was like the Lee Morgan. I mean, again, it sort of takes a page out of the Jazzers book where it's like those cats were like, we dig what we're playing, and we hope you dig what we're playing, but even if you don't, we're still going to play it. But
yeah.
I just want you to talk about like how you learn to get yourself off with what you create.
Oh man, that's such a broad question, and I could talk about that for a
Do it,
while.
man. Hit it.
But I'll try to zone in a little bit. Because I've lived, one of the it's a blessing and a curse in my life that I have a love for so many things. You know what I mean? And it's a blessing because I get to jump around and do all these things. And at the end of the day, it's my biggest blessing. But there's been moments that I thought it cursed me. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
Like still to this day, an absolute blessing that I am a part of Soul Live and Lettuce, and a part of these bands that, as I've gotten older, young kids have been influenced by that, which is crazy to me. Like I meet kids that are like, I went to my first concert, and and
It's the
even though
hippest stuff. Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
a small world of things, but but it was a very small part of my, not small, huge part, but like creatively one element to me as a musician. Like I grew up writing songs. I grew up, singing songs. I grew up being into production. And when I got into the band Soul Live, I was planning, like my life, I thought in my mind was I was going to be a record producer. That's what I wanted to do. I wanted to make records. I wanted to be in a studio. I was doing that already to on a very small level. I took this major turn that totally changed my life. You know what I mean? And it was the most beautiful thing in the world. But the problems that I have now with it is that I've made 3 records as a solo artist, and still the headline, no matter where I go, is Soul Live and Lettuce jazz funk guitarist Eric Krasno coming to your town. And like my music now, sure, there's elements of that, but it's really, I'm a singer songwriter now, that
Totally.
plays guitar, and I would not trade any of it. But and I think like it's kind of it's gonna sound a little ignorant to complain about that because it's a beautiful thing. But it's also like, I try to compare myself to, which I'm not supposed to, but you look at like whatever Alex Lifeson or somebody
Yeah.
like or who's the guy from the man, why am I spacing out? The guitarist from the Police. Like if he went out on tour, everyone would be like, guy from the Police, and he's probably made 20 records on his own. So it's one of those things where you're always, but I always have that desire to evolve and to keep changing. And I bet you if someone was like Eric Krasno, singer songwriter in 5 years, I'd be like, oh man, now I'm making electronic music. So
Oh
you
man.
want
Oh
people to
man.
pay
Yeah.
attention to what you're doing, but you also got to just understand that, and you got to be grateful for what's there. You know what I mean? And
It's just
it's
so, I want to say something though. This is so, because
yeah,
you're speaking like a pro, because Michael Shreve told me that for so long, obviously, you didn't have like, that you were with those bands, which are iconic bands and younger bands, but Michael was captured at 19 with that drum solo at Woodstock. And
yeah,
like
right,
you, he was a super creative guy who loved everything. And he did so much of his individual stuff. And no matter how many times he tried to convince people to take a right turn, they'd always say, hey, man, you're getting older, that Woodstock thing, man. And it was driving him
yeah,
crazy. And then at a certain point, he just said, you know what? Be happy that you were part of that. Be thankful and shut up about Woodstock. And whoever comes along for the new stuff, it's gratitude, but it's
yeah,
hard because we're talking about it before, this incessant need to label.
yeah,
To
yeah.
me, what you sent me, man, is so fresh, and it is totally singer songwriter, but there's elements of like Willie Hutch soundtrack in there, Charles Erlin soundtrack. There's funk. It's not. There's really not even a lot of stretching out. It's really it's danceable singer songwriter music. It really blew me away.
Thank you, thank you. Well, I will say that in my previous 2 albums, I was like chipping, and I would chip this dir I would, because here's the thing, I've produced. Luckily, I've been very fortunate to produce a lot of records, and it kind of enabled me to dig deep into the world of other
Mm.
artists, but it also kind of made me a little lost into what art I wanted to make. You know what I mean? Because I knew I wanted to write songs. My first record, Blood from a Stone, was like me writing songs, but not knowing how to really be a singer. Like I initially was going to have all these other singers on the record. So I wrote these songs thinking someone else would sing them, and then I kind of squeaked them out. You know what I mean? Because like I was like, my friends were all like, dude, you sound good. Like, let's just do this. Like, why are you waiting around? And I was like, you're right. Why am I waiting for other people to do this? Let me just do it. But in that process, I also didn't know where my voice was. I knew how to write the words and knew how to write the songs. I didn't know how to sing,
Mm.
So I was like,
Mm.
well, I didn't know how to write for my voice and like where I could be strong and where I could be sensitive. You know what I mean? So then, like the next record, I a little bit found more of where I wanted to sing, which is under the name Kraz Telescope, which is a whole other concept record. But I went so deep into the production that it sounds like I love the way that record sounds, but to a Soul Live and a Lettuce fan, it would be
Can
completely
you
a new
send that to me
genre.
later? I'd love
Yes,
to
I'll
hear
send it
that.
to you.
All right,
I
I'd
mean,
love to hear
I
it.
was really, I was digging, MGMT and Tame Impala, and I was really into like these people that were like doing these heavily produced, and I was playing synths. I was like,
Wow.
going crazy with synths, and everyone was like, dude, where's the guitar? So then after
Yeah.
making that record, I was like, okay, I need to like reel it back a bit and make something that is very playable. So here, what happened with Telescope is, in a weird, I put it out just before the pandemic, but before the pandemic happened, I got together and tried to play the shit. And it was like, okay, I need 5 synth players and 6 background singers. And I was like, wait a second here. Like, I didn't even think about that when I was making the record. I was just like, oh, layers and synths. And I love that record to death. Like,
Wow.
I think,
Wow,
but anyway,
dude.
I'll send it to
Telescope,
you.
man.
I mean, it's
Oh,
hard to
please,
find it
man.
because it's under the name Kraz. I was like
I
trying,
love it, man.
I was a little like in frustration mode of like, okay, not a lot of people are really paying attention to Eric Krasno. Like you go to Spotify and Eric Krasno's like Robert Walter, Grey Boy, Soul Live, and I'm like, my music does not sound like that. I
No,
love that music, it doesn't sound like that. So I was trying to like create a whole new persona, which if I was committed 1,000,000% to that, I don't think that I think it would have had a chance, but I just wasn't willing to like turn off everything else I did and just become a new thing. It was a great theory, but it was like, okay, I still like play with Otil and Phil and run around here and run around there. So like this next phase, I was like, okay, I need to make something that is that really joins those worlds where you can put it on next to like Silk Sonic or Anderson Paak, but you can also like play it for a Terrapin Crossroads junkie and they might like it. I wasn't thinking in those terms as I'm making it, but I was like, if I could land on something that really merged that and really showcased my guitar playing as well, I didn't want to have like 10-minute guitar solos because for me, I'm a big fan of doing that live, but in the record, kind of showcasing some of that, but not giving it all away.
I
You know what
love
I
it.
mean?
I love it.
So anyway, what happened was I was like creating some of these tracks acoustic, like all of those songs where I was just like, the other thing that I was doing was writing the songs with my guitar in my hands versus the Kraz rap record. I was like making beats and synth beats and then singing on them. And so I was like, I also should probably write these songs with my guitar in my hand.
Right.
So I started doing that, and then I met this guy Otis McDonald. He's from the Bay Area. If people haven't heard him, check out Otis McDonald on Spotify or whatever. He's an incredible producer. Adam Deitch and Will Blades both were like bombarding me with like Instagram reels of him making beats and stuff. And he's like, "You got to meet this guy. He reminds me of you." And bada bada bing. So we started talking on Instagram, and I was like, "Oh man, he had this one beat," and I started like writing this hook, and I was like, "Dude, I got this hook for this beat." And he's like, "Oh, that's cool, but I already put it out." And I'm like, "Oh." So he was like, I'm putting out songs like every week. I'm like, holy shit. And then he goes, I'm actually part of this foundation called Song Aid, and we're looking for songs to put on this compilation. Would you like to collaborate on something, a cover? And I was like, man, I've been learning this Bob Dylan song, Man in Me. It's been like haunting me. It's like, you ever have those songs that just like you hear it? So that song, I'd heard it growing up, and I'd heard it like in passing. And then one day I heard it again and it meant something totally different.
Right.
And then I started hearing it everywhere I went. It was like, and it probably was there before, but I didn't notice it. It was like that happens to me a lot where like a song hits
I
me a
love it's a
different
ghost
way.
thing. Yeah, I love it.
And then, yeah, I mean, that Grateful Dead song, that happens to me all the time. Like, oh my God, I've heard this my whole life, and now it means that.
Yeah.
It really means that. Holy shit. And then, so anyway, I was obsessed with that song. My wife was pregnant. I was like moving into a new place, recently married. Like, it was all like, it just hit me with a ton of bricks. So I sent him an acoustic track to like a little percussion beat that I made. And he sent me back this beautiful track, which you can hear on the album. And then I added guitar and other shit, and this was all during the pandemic. So I had set out to make an acoustic record because I thought that would be the easiest thing to make by myself in my studio. But then when I met him, we created this flow of sending tracks back and forth. And that track Silence was the second one. After I heard him do Man to Me, I was like, I got this other one, man. It's just me with a piano and a guitar. Do your thing to it. So I'd send him the piano, the guitar, and the vocal, and he would add bass and drums and background vocals and percussion. And he added this vibe to it where it really sounded like we were a band. And then it evolved into us using the internet and playing together and kind of creating this sound that became the album Always. And then after that, we started getting together. We kind of created this band called The Assembly, with Will Blades, Otis McDonald, James the Eighth, and Curtis Kelly. And it's just it's was just really feel like it was meant to be this combination of people. And everybody sings, everyone plays great. It feels like I watched the documentary on the band recently, and it really feels I feel that same way. Where like any moment in the show, anyone in this band could just be the leader, and sing and
Ah,
play. And so we're starting off with like supporting this album, but the vision is for it to really be its own entity that becomes something else, and the next record I want to make is going to be like the band in the studio. And then sorry, I'm like totally
no,
going off here,
dude,
but
Kraz, I'm
so
loving it. You're making me so happy right now.
right.
Yeah.
Well, I'm just like, because I'm so excited right now. You can't. I have very, I'm generally a happy uh, person, but
Sure.
not always inspired. And I'm in a
Mm.
very inspired place, partly from this Get Back Beatles documentary that literally changed my life.
I
There's
haven't
not
seen it
many.
yet. I mean,
Oh
how
my
could you
God,
possibly have
dude.
been, how have you, I mean, what was I mean, we've already been inspired by that group so much.
It completely blew my mind.
Oh,
Um,
gee.
and I don't know how much it's impacting everyone else, but
No, it's already
for
been, some
for
other people brought it up. They were fired up about it.
it's yeah, I mean, and it doesn't, and most people would be like, I thought it was going to be like, oh my God, they're such geniuses, this is so cool. But that's not why. What it really made me excited about is that they're not. They're normal dudes,
Yeah.
but they had this they did have obviously a lot of talent, work ethic, and like number one, like compassion for each other. And like, but also they were like fucking goofy young kids, fucking around in the studio, but pushing each other and then like it just reminded me of every band I've ever been in. And like all us fucking around, and one person be like, all right, let's pull it together, and then like someone making fun of him, and then the other guy fucking goofing off, and like it's just they were totally normal, but to watch them create these songs that became so iconic because there's all this footage in there that of like the seeds of something in the way she moves, and like the moment he comes up with Get Back, and you realize that a lot of it was happening in real time. It wasn't like they were sitting in some bedroom learning like writing these songs and then presenting it to the band. A lot of it was like sitting there in that room and one guy going, oh wait, do that a little different. And dude, the moment when he's coming up with Get Back, because it starts with just nothing, he's just going da na ba na ba na, and you're like, oh man, that kind of sounds like Get Back. Then he starts doing the second chord,
Oh
and you're like,
man.
oh dude, that's gonna be Get Back in a few minutes. And he's like, oh, then when he starts doing it to the four and then back to the one, you're like, oh shit, keep going, you're almost there. You're like cheering him on to get there, and he's gonna get there because you've been listening to this fucking song for 50 years. And the footage feels like you're in the room. Like the weird, like eerie thing of like I couldn't stop watching it till it was done. Then it was over, and I felt like there was like a hole in my stomach because I was like, wow, I was like there, and that was actually 50 years ago. Like everyone in that room, besides a couple of people, or have lived a full life and they're dead. You know. And like that dawned on me in a really like it just like I'm still like in this weird zone from watching it.
When did you watch
Uh,
it? Yesterday? 2 days ago?
this weekend.
Oh
This
my,
weekend.
dude, you are
Yeah.
inspired beyond. I mean,
So the next
yeah,
day,
yeah.
I called the guys. Most of my band lives in LA, although Otis lives in San Francisco. I was like, we got to get together right now, And we went in. We went in and we cut two songs. I mean, I had two ideas, but I was so inspired by how they got in the studio and just like chiseled these songs out of like massive, not to sound cheesy, but these huge pieces of clay that were like kind of an idea, and then they would chisel it down together as a group. I mean, it's not a revolutionary idea by any means, but it's just I just got so inspired
Well, no,
watching
but it was,
what they
but at
did.
that time, it was
Yeah,
completely revolutionary.
yeah, the way they were doing it, and I do feel that, even with all the technology that we have and the ability to record at home and all that type of thing, I guess a part of it for me too is spending the last three years mostly alone and with my family. And I loved that, to be honest, to be in a room with musicians and like have those creative like juices flowing. I just there's nothing like that.
You know, talking to Eric Krasno here on the Jake Feinberg show. I just interviewed, I mean, I just was transcribing an interview with the late great Mel Martin, who was an amazing reed player, played in like Azteca, played with Boz Scaggs, also like a heavy
Oh yeah.
jazzer. And he had a band called Listen, and they made a couple albums in the late 70s. And he talked about how they, um, they spent 6 months not perseverating, but working out new material and very, angular, a lot of odd metered stuff. But basically, they spent 6 months before they played a live gig, putting their stuff together, and then pushing the ball forward a little bit. When you talk about this next album that you're planning on, I mean, do you see yourself being able to get the band into a rural space or some kind of big pink kind of space? Do you think that that will, and then basically coming with as little material as possible, and kind of like you said before with the documentary, they kind of made stuff up on the spot, maybe come in with themes. But do you feel like for this next album, that in your mind, do the cats have to be together for at least an extended period of time? Is that even possible in today's world?
I would like to do that. Yes, it is possible. Well, one thing is that, Otis McDonald, whose real name is Joe Bigale, his artist name is Otis
I
McDonald.
love that. Yeah.
He has the famous Studio D at Hyde Street Studios is his studio, which
No,
used to be
no.
Wally Hyder. Yeah.
Oh my
So the
Studio
room,
D.
yeah. So the room that the drums and a lot of the tracking for my album is the same room where American Beauty, Garcia's solo album,
All the
Herbie
Credence
Hancock
albums. Yeah,
Thrust.
unbelievable.
I mean, Herbie Thrust. Are you kidding me?
Ah,
A lot of Headhunters was made in that room. So what I think we'll do is hopefully get is just work in that room. But I also could, but which would be more of a not a rural environment. But yeah, I do kind of fantasize about being like up in the woods somewhere, with like where we can lock ourselves away and throw our phones into a river or something, and you know what I mean? Like
dude,
that's
that's what
the
I'm
shit.
saying, because that's where
Yeah,
to me, it's like you come in with some themes or some
yeah,
flavors, but ultimately nothing's really scripted, and you immerse yourselves in the collective conversation and see what comes out.
yeah. That's what I would really like to do. That's my next, the next vibe that I want to dive into. Again, I've been there before, but not with this group of people and not with, the idea to really craft songs that we'll sing together. I've done it a lot of different ways, but this will be a new way with a fresh take, So I'm excited. I'm excited for that next chapter. And I think this tour coming up will be really, you know, will really feed that inspiration and just get us tighter. I mean, we've been doing a bunch of shows. We got to our first show was Red Rocks, which is like a great sign for a new band to get to do that.
Yeah, I mean, the
And
music is real. I mean, do you feel like I forget the name of the tune, but I kept listening to it last night because I wanted to keep going. Track 5, and I forget the name of it.
track 5,
Yeah,
I'd have to like look because I don't remember,
it's
but I have it on
so
my
hip,
computer.
and it's like it's kind of there's an extended jam. But I mean, do you see? Um, I mean, how did
Oh yeah, Alone Together. Yeah, that
that?
has like the outro that gets really
Oh
psychedelic.
my God, I just freaking keeps
Yeah.
going and I'm like, don't stop to read, keep going back. But I like it. It's like in your mind, we talked about it. You talked about the Spotify thing, but I'm just curious to ask you, because in the past, you'd have a record-based industry, and people were trying to make radio-friendly hits or maybe catch something and get a regional radio hit back when people had, AM, FM in their car and things. I mean, when you make this album, um, this one in the present, like how were you making it so that it would find certain, like, where are the vectors that it can go,
So remember I was saying I'm blessed and cursed?
yeah, but I'm saying, here's what I'm saying. Like, here's the point. I
Yeah,
know what you're gonna. I'll let you riff on it. It's just, to
yeah,
me,
yeah,
like, part of it is stay. The classic Gil Scott Heron album. It's okay to be a moving target. It's actually better. I
yeah.
mean, it might be frustrating in the business sense, but I like the fact that you don't want to be pigeonholed. But again, you're trying to, what are the vectors, man?
Yeah, I mean, that's a really good question. And, a lot of the people around me don't know.
Right.
I
Well,
wish
that's okay. It's
it's a,
good that, yeah.
that's, I mean, that it's frustrating. Like, we're not not, and again, I'm on a small independent label and, it's not like we've got built millions of dollars to spend, but even the stuff we're doing, it's hard to take on a big radio campaign for a record like this is hard to do. So you kind of have to in a certain way, depend on word of mouth, and word of mouth also meaning people sharing it and on the internet and doing things like that. And, people, tastemakers talking about it and NPR featuring. And it's like an amalgamation of like so many things that you got to like hope happens. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I
But
dig,
but
man. I
there's
dig.
but
I dig.
there's no real like you hire a publicist and the publicist is like, okay, pay me a shitload of money, but I'm not going to guarantee you anything. And so it's like you don't know in this day and age what to do, but you gotta like hope and pray that good music prevails. I mean, it's simple as that for me. And like I used to get upset and frustrated, and I'm not saying I don't anymore, but I don't let it like deflate me. You know what I mean? I just kind of keep going. And that's partly why I decided signed with a label this time. So I like didn't even want to know. It's like last time I was like, running my own label and involved, and it's like I just don't want to be involved in that side. I want to hand you my creative piece of art and let you someone else figure that out, and hope that over time. I mean, I'm never going to be an overnight success. I'm just going to be that guy that
Whatever, dude. It
that
doesn't
keeps
matter. Yeah.
it doesn't,
Yeah.
for me, it's like I'm going to be trudging up that hill regardless. And even if I make a really shitty move, like that, the one thing I will say is
Mm.
like, if I got huge radio play and like a big hit, I would have, the ability to fall after that. Like, I don't really have the ability to fall right now because I'm just moving at this slow pace, like up this hill that's like, but no one can take any of it away. Even if I make a shitty decision,
I
I'm
love it,
still
man.
here
I
tomorrow,
freaking love
you
it,
know.
man. Ah, it's
But
just so beautiful.
but the good thing is that I truly believe I'm making better music than ever, So that's all that, and that's what matters, and I'm building on things and trying to get to a place where someone will say Eric Krasno that created this album versus 20 albums ago,
I
you
just,
know.
all I'm saying is like, I mean, it's hard, man. Like we going back to the beginning of the conversation, it's like, I love putting up music clips. I don't care if they get, people are so into like the likes and the comments. It's like,
Yeah.
it's like, what's going to make you happy? What's going to, I guess most importantly, also, it's like, you know, when you look back on your time in the academy, you've, we're both from the same kind of Gen Xer, generation. And I wonder about what you can say that you took away from your experience there, not necessarily playing live in Boston, but what is something from the academy that you learned that that you still apply to, whether it's production or music? Or I only ask because, I mean, I feel like our generation, in some ways, that late 90s period was the last generation. We didn't grow up with cell phones. We really didn't grow up with computers that much. There was a lot of ear training going on. Our ears were still pretty big. Um, but now today, cats are going to the academy and just, I mean, I'm very ambivalent about kids coming out sounding like their professors. And then on top of that, like, how do you even sing for your supper? So what is something that you look back on that you can say you've carried through to today from your time in the academy?
Well, I mean, I moved around so much back in those days, like and for me, it was never really. I took so many little things from everything
Mm,
that I was around.
mm,
I look back as like, I am thankful that I was around so many great people. And for me, it was less about the school or the place that I was, but more about the people that I met and that kind of were willing to take me under their wing and give me a chance. You know what I mean? And because I know I didn't really show, I think that I would, I guess really what it was like I was hungry. You know what I mean? That much everybody knew that I really wanted to learn and I really wanted to absorb. I wouldn't say that I was a master of any skill at that point. I really was just, but I wanted to do it all. And like that is what feeds kind of where I'm at now, is that I wasn't like, oh, let me be the most ripping bebop guitar player, and I wasn't really like, let me be the best engineer in the world, but it was like, okay, let me be able to go into a studio, know my way around, and be able to record something and be able to play every instrument on it if I have to. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And like I guess it was a lot of moments like that where I would be able to be around someone that would really want to show me. I was really lucky like that. And then that carried through, because then once Soul Live happened, Alan was a great engineer, but also knew a lot about the road and was able to, I absorbed that. And then when we got signed to Blue Note, I got to work under these amazing people. It was kind of the end of that generation where
Right.
like Bruce Lundvall was one of the great record execs, like a different breed from the guys you meet now. He was an old school
Can
guy
you
from
talk
this.
about? I cannot believe you just dropped his name, because Billy Cobham
Yeah,
was talking about him back in the Columbia days with Mahavishnu.
yeah.
What? Tell me
Oh,
about that
dude.
guy.
I mean, he's one of these guys that's kind. I mean, I feel like people do talk about him now. He's a bit of an unsung hero in the record
Sure.
industry, but everyone that knew him knew the impact that he had. And if you remember, and he really brought the Blue Note label back to life. Like in the '90s, he signed, Soul Live, and Desi Martin and Wood, Carl Denson, Schofield, like that whole little era of music with. And Bruce was an older guy at that point, but he kept like his finger on the pulse of what was going on. But he had also signed people like Mahavishnu and Lena Horne, and like he was an old school guy. You would go into his office and he had a piano in there and a record player, and he'd tell me stories about, hanging with Miles and hanging with this guy and hanging with that guy. And every time I'd go in there, he'd hand me a record and tell me about story of how it got made. And I got to take it home with me. And, like
I
that
love
was,
it.
I don't know if that'll ever happen again.
I know,
Like record
man.
labels don't even have offices anymore, you know? So I'm so thankful. And I was like a little dipshit kid. But he like really saw something in me, and so did the rest of the people at Blue Note. And then, our first record on Blue Note, we got to work in the greatest studio in the world and work with Bob Brockman, the engineer, producer. And he would sit there with me and say, this is what an SSL is, and this is why a Neve is better, and this is why this mic works for this. And I like learned, I was the first guy there, last guy to leave.
Wow.
And even
Love
though
it.
he was
Love
producing
it.
our record, it was like, that was the best schooling I ever had, were those moments. And then Fred Wesley, who was my hero of all time, who
Oh,
did all the
legend.
jam, came in and arranged the horns for our record. I remember the conversation with our A&R guy. Shout out to Eli Wolf from Blue Note, who was
Yeah.
our A&R, who was like only a year or two older than me. So like he and I were like high fiving, like see, like trying to act cool when all this cool shit would happen. But like, but he was like, well, who would you want to arrange your horns? And I was like, oh man, I'm sure it's a pipe dream, but Fred Wesley. He's like, oh, I know him. And he called him. And then like the next day, Fred was like, yep. And he arranged the horns to like songs I'd written. And I was like crying. I was like, are you kidding me? And then we got like the best horn section in the world. And they came in and we had this big budget. And, I mean, looking back at it, it's insane how much money we spent on those records. It's more than like 5 or 6 records combined these days. But or probably 10 times. We had like caterers and, like people flying in and limos and
No,
nice
Wesley was
hotels.
flying. Wesley was flying. Where were you, in Inglewood Cliffs? Is that where you were?
No, no, we recorded at what now is called Power Station. It was called Avatar back then. And it was, the nicest studio in New York City.
Oh
We
man.
had it locked out with like 2 rooms and catering and tons of people. I didn't even know what anyone was doing. I was
Dude,
like, who is this guy?
that's like an old school like blood, sweat, and tears session. There was like
Oh no,
bowls.
we were
Yeah.
Soul Live was full on,
Yeah.
like in the height of the record industry. We were signed to Blue Note. And then we did, after, it wasn't really till the mid like 2005 or six that the decline started to hit, and then by 2010 that whole thing was over. Like big budget records
Well,
and
let's
all
talk
that
about that. I
stuff.
want to talk about this then, because I just want you to talk to younger cats. You talked about the first album you did where you sang and you squeaked it out because you didn't
Yeah.
know you did. Talk a little bit about how you learned. I can't articulate it the way you did, but where the phrasing comes in and where things work for your voice. Like, how did you hone that? And then ultimately, is it really more about mental strong fortitude than anything else at that point? I mean, to me, like you wanted, like at Berkeley, you wanted to just have the chops to be able to go in and do stuff and be efficient and be able to do it yourself. But with the singing part, take us through how you evolved because I mean, you're singing like it's like Blue Eyed Soul, man.
Oh, I appreciate you
It's
saying
true. I
that.
mean,
Well,
I'm
I
not,
would
I'm
say
not, and I'm not,
the
it's truth,
biggest,
man. It's like
well,
really, it's pretty, I mean, that's what I guess what I worry about is you hope the cream rises to the top. I hope,
right,
because
right.
it's fucking good.
Well, I appreciate you saying that. I think it's like this for me. I've always been a songwriter. I've been, well, I don't want to say always, but I wrote songs with lyrics first. And then I was in bands like Lettuce and Soul Live, where
Right.
my focus was writing instrumental music for a while. And then, like, really why I just, it started with the album called No Place Like Soul, which is a Soul Live record, where I was writing all these songs and I was secretly, singing them, but I was just demoing them for other people. Which at first was a guy named Toussaint, and then Nigel Hall came into my life, and he was
Sure.
like such a great singer. I had him sing on my first album, actually, the one that's called Reminisce, and then I produced his album, which is mostly my songs. And I was just needed a vehicle. So I was singing, and I always thought I mean, this is going to sound weird, but I always thought I had like a good idea of phrasing and melody, but I didn't feel like I had the singing, and which is kind of true. I mean, I feel like you can relate it to like a football player. Like there might be someone who has like great footwork and they know what to do, and maybe they become a coach or something, but they never had the physicality to do it.
Well,
Like
no, the
I
best
went,
coaches are
yeah.
not necessarily the best players. You're absolutely right.
Right, right. So I kind of felt that way for a long time, and then I was like, so many records I love are people that aren't technically great singers. Like Hendrix always said, "I'm not a singer." Bob Dylan, like, is obviously not the best singer, but they just did it, and like that was the mentality that I had. The only issue that I had at that point was that stylistically, I'm not a Hendrix and I'm not a Dylan. They're the guys that even when they talk, they sound cool. You know what I mean? And I've got like this nasally, and
That's
not to
yeah,
be,
no, I mean, it's fine. I mean,
but
you have to be able to tell the story, right?
yeah, yeah. So what happened was, I did work on it, and like that first tour after Blood from a Stone album came out, I toured with my band, and I struggled. And what happened was I realized, okay, these are the keys that I'm strong in. My band has to play softer when I'm singing,
Mm-hmm.
because like Soul Live's a super loud band that just bangs it out, and we'd always had to have these singers that just blasted out volume, and that's just not me. So like you figure out what works for you, and one of the things you'll notice in my songs is like in the verse, it's pretty bare. And then when it gets to the jam section, the background singers might be singing, but I'm playing my guitar. So like you use your tools. It's like my singing is very much to like get the lyrics across and the melody across, and then when I'm going for it and the emotions pouring out, that's going to be my guitar. You know, so that's what I have to do. It's versus like a Stevie Wonder, who it's like when it comes to that outro bridge section, he's wailing over the top. That's not going to be my vocals. That's going to be my guitar. So,
Oh,
I think it was also just finding that, just being like, okay, this is where I sing good. This is where I can have like some swagger to my voice. It's like in this key range and
yeah,
in
no,
this kind of,
man,
and
yeah.
then from there, if I'm gonna like do the modulation Stevie Wonder thing, then it's my guitar from there. You know what I mean? So, um, And then as time goes on, I learn ways to make my vocal fit in there, you know? Like now, like live, there's like outros to some of my older songs where I do like sing more, you know what I mean? But it took me a while to gain the confidence and just the physicality of it. Like you have to really work at it, you know? And you have to think about it. Like when you're on the road, that extra fucking drink and smoke or whatever you're going to do is going to affect your performance the next day a lot more vocally than on a guitar or anything else. So that's
Very
another
interesting.
thing.
Very
Yeah,
interesting.
it's
So interesting.
physical.
Yeah,
It's
man.
physical. It's like a whole different thing. Like when I was touring with Soul Live, it was just like, all right, party,
Yeah,
you
right,
know.
right, man.
And
No
then
need for
like
the voice, man. Yeah.
yeah, like you doing after VIP meet and greet or any shit like that. Like you have to really be thinking about that all the time when you're singing, you know.
Kraz, we have a game on this program called Name That Voice.
Yeah,
Pay attention to the content and we'll come back and break it down.
cool.
Well, I don't think that compassion was an issue at that time for that transition, that recovery. Um, there was a split. There was a polarity that came to the surface of the experience itself, and the polarity was the past when that tumor did exist, and now at that time, from this point, it still is the past, but then it wasn't the past. It was a change. And I saw a total difference between what was beginning to emerge and what existed prior to the event that caused the transition. And what was beginning to emerge had certain faults in itself. And one of the strongest of them was the lack of retainment, the lack of memory.
Mm-hmm.
And because of that, I had to really focus more on the moment than depend on expectations of something that I thought should be there. That's when change really began to take place. And I began to focus more upon pleasure of the moment, the simplicity of now. Had no disruption, no distraction by thoughts that came from the past, fears of something that might happen in the future. The only thing that really existed was in the now. And was the birth of that realization that turned into a perspective that became the issue, became my priority from that point forward, and still is to this day. It comes down to focus upon the moment and the pleasure of life itself without the extension into any kind of distractions. So I think compassion has something to do with that, along with all of the other virtues.
You want to take a guess at who that is?
Wow.
I'm-
Man, I don't know the voice of the guy who I think someone that came to mind was Ram Dass, but
well, that's a beautiful. I never interviewed, unfortunately.
also what he's talking about reminds me of Pat Martino.
Bang, dang, you got it, dude.
Okay, it is
Yeah,
Pat Martino.
yeah.
Okay, great.
That was my.
I didn't, yeah, I thought it was Pat Martino at first, and I was like, is Pat like that so eloquent?
Dude,
Because
I'm
I've
telling.
actually,
Yeah,
because
go
I've
ahead.
hung out with Pat, and I don't remember, I've never had a conversation that went that deep,
Dude,
you
I've
know?
done like I've done probably 10 hours of interviews, and every one of those interviews is so deep. That's why people love the interviews I've done with Pat.
Oh,
Because,
wow.
dude,
Because
because I
I,
mean, it's
yeah,
philosophic, man. I mean,
yeah.
Kraz, it's like you're
I'm
talking.
glad that I didn't let you say it before I said
I'm
it.
so glad you got it, dude. You
Because I
nailed it.
thought Pat Martino, and then I was like, oh man, that sounds like Ram Dass, like, you know, and then I had to go back.
First of all,
Wow.
rest in peace, Pat. But
Both of them, yeah.
both of them. But
Yeah.
this is the thing, and maybe you can just and be as frank as possible. But it's like, we're talking about the tour in 2022 and future album and this album, and there's just we're living in this sort of this insane time that we've been sort of talking about as far as how do you get your product out there, how do you and you know, there's all this push towards the future, and yet to me, I'm always trying to be grateful, but stay in the now. And when I see on YouTube, like you're playing with Johnny V, you know, and you're playing with, you know, you've hung out with all the shaman cats and the lineage. And I just want you to talk about, like, especially on the bandstand, like when I saw you with Circles on that run, man, it's still seared into my mind, like how incredible your solos were in the sense that like there was no repeating, there was no like I didn't feel like there were any extra notes, and yet you had to solo for 10, sometimes 8 or 10 minutes. Can you just talk about how you really learned? Because in our day-to-day lives, you can worry about the future, think about the past. It's hard to stay in the moment, but especially on the bandstand, how you've learned to be here now.
Right, right. Well, before I answer that,
Yeah.
you just made me think of this George Harrison quote that I'm just going to say real
You're
fast. 'Cause I
obsessed
had
with the
it
Beatles right
because,
now.
yeah, I'm
Love it.
really
Yeah.
obsessed right now.
Yeah.
So I just want to say it. He says, "It's being here now that's important. There's no past and there's no future. Time is a very misleading thing. All there is ever is the now." So
Man,
I love that. I love
thank
that.
you. Thank you.
Beyond that, um, what was I going to say?
Well, you know
Shit.
what it is? Like, what I want to know is, like, do you have to, because you know what it is? I talk to enough cats on the bandstand to know when the minute you start thinking, you lose that ability. Like,
Yeah.
how have you learned over time to sort of, I mean, it's Zen. I mean, it's really a Zen quality.
Yeah, I mean, I think also your surroundings and are like, yes, I do think that's something that I've been able to tap into easier as I get older and understand the importance of it. But like with circles specifically, it was so much easier because they were all tuned in.
Yeah.
You know, there was like, because like, and I hate to say this because I wouldn't say that like my other bands or my other musician friends are ego driven, but egos are always going to be there.
Everywhere.
Myself included, even like from every angle, not just the musicians on stage. You know what I mean?
Totally.
And one thing that felt really important, and it might have also just been that run and the importance of that run in a certain way, and Neil's recent passing. And, you know, it was a hard decision to even do that, you know, because of what the situation was. You know, but it was also this really cathartic experience. Um, and
It was maybe one of the it was maybe the best live show. The show in San Francisco at the Independent was quite possibly the greatest show I've ever seen in my life. So I mean, it was
that I do remember that moment being very powerful.
oh
I
my
remember
God,
leaving
Neely was there,
there.
man. The
Yeah,
spirits were there. I'm just saying. I
yeah,
know it was.
yeah,
You were on. It was so. I mean, it was freaking. I mean, I was just having a ball. It was fucking
yeah,
great, man. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. It was interesting and it was special. And you know, Adam McDougall is just one of my favorite people on the
Legend.
planet.
Legend.
Uh,
Legend.
and as a musician, all of them, you know. And I really connected with Mark a lot during that too. But Adam is all. I've been a fan of Adam's. I've spent time with him over the years, and it just felt so right once we were doing it. Whereas
Mhm.
leading up to it, I was really kind of, I don't want to say nervous, just, you know, it was an emotional thing. It was an emotional decision to make, to do it or not, you know, and just so many things. And it kind of affected the future of it after too, because it was kind of like, how do we I was like, I don't know if I can keep doing that. You know, it's like, it's too emotional, you
I
know, it's
actually think
too,
you did. I think you did. I mean, in some ways, it's an impossible task, except when you get on the bandstand, you start to feel the magic, and it's like, oh my God, this is. I think it was just the perfect little. I mean, it was just a perfect taste, and to get, and it wasn't like you did your job, like you did what you needed to do. You did your service for Neely, you know.
Yeah. Well, that I'm glad that you say that because
It's true, man.
it felt that way to me, and I was hoping that no one saw it as anything else because,
Honestly, no, I mean,
it's
it was kind of eerie because nothing felt forced, and it came across as completely authentic. And considering I mean, you just sort of placed yourself into a group that was already locked in, and it came across completely authentic. And uh, it was just, I could not believe it was like, I felt like it couldn't go. It was like a Coltrane. I mean, if I could ever see Coltrane, it was like, it couldn't, you didn't think it could get higher, and it would just get higher and higher.
yeah, yeah.
It was like a spiritual thing, man. It was very real.
Yeah, and yeah, it was such a it was a trip. It was a trip. And then the LA show felt really good too. But yeah, I remember that San Francisco show was special.
Oh man,
And
special, man. But I mean, in the
yeah,
moment, how
and
do
just
you?
playing with those
Yeah.
guys in general, it was really an amazing thing for me, and yeah, it was I did feel really sad to not keep doing it, to be honest, and I've never said that before. But like, it didn't feel right for me to do it. Does that make sense?
Well, I mean,
Like
I mean, I think it's funny because I interviewed Metzger, and
yeah,
he said something. I mean, again, this is everything changed with the pandemic, but
yeah,
you know, it. I can only say that it's probably your own. Only what that would feel like. It was very close to Neely's passing, but I just
yeah,
feel like, if nothing else, it was it was as powerful as any and I it was as powerful as any show that I ever saw with Neely.
yeah,
It's incredible. I mean,
yeah.
and then just on an aside, at the beginning of the pandemic, I went to see a Grateful Shred show at Terrapin Crossroads, and they have these postcards as we were leaving, and I saw one of you and Lesh, just this great picture, and I picked it up, and I just put it in my dash in my car, and it's been there the entire pandemic.
Oh, nice,
So it's just
nice.
like you and Phil just rocking out. But I mean, how much of it is like, because you're going through all these machinations, it doesn't matter if you're playing with Phil or Billy Kreutzmann, or, it's like, can I do this? Like, what's going on? Like, at the end of the day, when you hit the bandstand, none of that stuff matters. How have you learned to sort of just lose yourself? Because the minute you start thinking,
Yeah.
and it haunts a lot of musicians, the minute you start getting in your head, you're done.
Yeah, well, I will say that most gigs that I do, I'm fortunate that people want me to do what I would do.
Right.
So, I'm
Yeah.
lucky in
Right.
that way
Right.
because I have a lot of friends that are very successful in like the pop world and the sideman world that are asked to do things that are very much not them. It's
Right.
just to fill a role.
Oh, yeah.
And even though I am a sideman at times, it really is in a situation always where they want my input and they want my vibe. So I'm very fortunate that I usually have the freedom to make choices. But in this situation of circles or the situation of playing the Grateful Dead music, you do want to make choices that are respectful to the vision that you didn't create. And I love that I get to do those when I choose to or when they choose me to,
I love
but
it.
that's
I
that but
love
that's
it, man.
not like my life,
I
you
know.
know what I
No,
mean?
I know.
Like,
I know
and
it's not.
that's
I know it's not. I
well,
know.
that's the whole thing. And to be just to address, because I feel like I have to address the
Hit it.
circles
Yeah.
thing. It's like the circles thing felt more comfortable than anything I'd done in so long. Like I felt so comfortable in that setting. But when the dress, when looking at it being like, okay, you're going to be touring 100 dates a year, playing the music that you didn't plan out, or you weren't like an architect in this, it didn't feel authentic, you know what I mean? And it didn't feel, and not that someone else, and I was like, it just doesn't feel like I can put my heart behind that in the right way, where I could be up there really giving it my all. Coming in to do these shows that were already there and to get to do it is a huge blessing, and to get to play with them was amazing. But I think that it never would have worked for me to be a part of that band, because it's like it was every time I did it, like that amount of emotion can't happen every day. Of like, you know what I mean? Like, or I'm gonna die. You know what I
Dude,
mean?
it
It
was
was like
so
it was
emotional,
like
man.
because
Yeah.
yeah, it was like to hear Neil's playing every night as I'm playing. Because I was hearing him. You know what I mean? So it was like
Dude,
it
it was
was not.
ridiculous, dude.
It
It was,
wasn't
I mean,
like doing like playing the Grateful Dead music. Obviously, Jerry's been gone for. It's like he's almost not. I didn't know Jerry. It wasn't. I didn't sit there and learn songs with him and have experiences with him, and so it's different playing that music. But somehow with Neil, it was just too close. It was just too.
dude, you went
You
in,
know.
you got a taste of the entire buffet, and you were at. I mean, it's fine. It's not a big deal. I mean, to me, like I would not. uh I just feel like it was so natural that. But I mean, how like when you're in that zone, like, do you leave your physical body in some ways? Like, because it feels to me like you go higher and higher and higher. At a certain point, you don't even the music's playing you. That's the magic of music. I mean,
Yeah.
how that's the addiction of the whole live
Well, yeah,
experience.
that's the goal. The
Right.
goal is to completely lose yourself. I think Stevie Ray Vaughan was like. They're someone in an interview, they're like, what do you think about when you're playing, and he's like, hopefully nothing.
Yeah.
Because I
How?
mean it's
Yeah.
it's it's the same thing as meditation. It's like you're working towards thinking nothing. And it's funny because I try to meditate. You know what I mean? And
Me too. Yeah.
I guess I do meditate. I mean, really, I'm more into like stretching and doing yoga and stuff. But people talk about, if you can if you can like get every single thought out of your mind. I'm like, I meditate every day because playing guitar is that. It's
That's
like
right.
that's what
That's
once
absolutely
that
right.
it takes me. I have to do that to do it. You
You
know
know
what I
what,
mean?
dude? I'm telling you, man, you're nailing it. I mean, it's like you think about all the cats. Uh, that is meditation.
Yeah.
On the bandstand. And then I guess what I'm saying is what are the kind of things, even when you feel comfortable, do you just listen? Like, how do you start to get into that meditative zone? Because I mean, there are cats that will do sedentary yoga meditation, and they've done it for so long that they actually had to rid themselves of all their habitual stuff. And then they're actually like in total stillness. I'm nowhere near that. I don't even come close to that. But to me, like when you're on, what are the antecedents? What are the beginning things? Are you like with circles? Are you listening to all the other instruments? How do
Oh,
you,
absolutely. I
yeah,
mean, you're trying, there's times where, I mean, in a perfect world, you're just reacting off of everything around you, and they're listening and you're listening, and it becomes, and that they were so good at that,
yeah.
that was one of the things about it that was really special, is that
Uh,
they created this kind of atmosphere that was so wide open,
uh,
and also not like always so loud. Like I'm kind of a lot of my bands, like when it's like time to improvise, it's like louder. I liked how it was like it gave me so much room to like settle into a vibe. And that makes it so much easier because then you don't have to do this. A lot of times, if it's like, okay, solo, get louder and push it, you have to like go to your go-to moves. You know
sure.
what I mean? It's like
Right.
basketball or boxing. It's like everyone has their famous move. You know what I mean? You know what I mean?
It totally did.
It's like everyone's got their like fucking, wrap around knockout punch or whatever you call it. And like I've got those, but in a perfect world, I don't have to use them. It's like in a perfect world, it's totally in the moment, creating something brand new, you know, um, and then sometimes you have to implement those things.
Well,
But
like
in
I
a
want to ask
perfect,
you on
yeah.
this tour that in coming up in February, like at Pappy's or like, it's really funny you brought up the acoustic thing because going back to the Mel Martin interview, he had played with Boz Scaggs and Azteca and it was loud. And he goes, when you're playing loud, there's only one thing you can do is play louder. And I'm done with that.
That's a good point. Yeah.
And you think about the Dead, like in 1980, they did those Warfield shows, but looking back on it, I know what they were thinking. They were like, it's getting too loud. Let's get acoustic. Do you see yourself? Because you did say that the original concept of this current album was maybe doing it acoustically. And I just wonder if you think that some of the performances could be acoustic, or some of the songs.
We're already planning it. You know, Son Little performs acoustic. Like he'll do whole tours acoustic. So like he's going to do certain, and that, by the way, just to explain the show a little more, it's the same band. The Assembly is my band, and Son Little and I are featured, but it's really a continuous concert. So there'll be acoustic Son Little. There might be a moment of just me and him acoustic. There might be a moment of me acoustic. There might be a moment of James, my guitarist, do a couple acoustic. And like, but I mean, they'll all be backed in different. So we're still planning it out, but there's going to be a whole kind of interwoven thing. There'll be like full, soul review band moments, and with Son Little and me. And so the idea is that it's really kind of a review, like,
totally. I love
so that's the vibe. But yeah, to answer your question, the dynamics of this band are way different in terms of like, there are very soft moments, hopefully acoustic moments. Then there's like full bore,
burning
electric moments. Yeah, all of that'll be there. So I think, the plan is to make it a very dynamic show, that kind of has a lot of different moods to it.
I have another Name That Voice for you. It's going to be a little bit harder, I think, but
okay,
check it out and we'll come back.
Cool.
Well, it wasn't so much the drummer, by the way. It was, I love playing with drums, because drums, the first thing in my mind comes is drums, but really syncing up with the left and right hand of the organ. The way the organ plays, Jimmy Smith, Jack McDuff. I went to see Jack McDuff my first 2 months I was at Berkeley, and that's when I first met George Benson. He was 18 years old, and he was a fantastic soloist, and he plays great rhythm too. But I noticed that the way Jack McDuff played rhythm, that's what started me thinking about, organ trio rhythm guitar players, other than like Freddie Green, that kind of comping. And that's where I really took off. Then I started my own group with a trio, with actually a quintet, but left-hand bass.
Well, that I guess the only hint that I'd give you is I'd say that I think you would have been him if the studio scene was as active today as it was in the 60s and 70s, you would have been this guy. It's not David Spinoza, and I'm not comparing styles, but
shit, I don't know, man.
No, I mean, there's no reason. There's no reason. That was my first interview with John Tropez.
Oh, okay.
And
I'm not so familiar with him, to be honest. So
me neither. It's just like, I got to get to everybody, but it's like, I really wanted you to talk about, I also interviewed from the Sons of Champlin, Terry Haggerty, and I wanted you to talk about if you feel like your rhythm chops have increased or enhanced your ability to, regardless of whether it's take as many bars as you want, or if it's just a short compact solo, if your ability to really have good rhythm has enhanced your improvisational style.
Oh, absolutely. I think that's like most.
And the reason I bring it up is because Haggerty said, he goes, when I play with the younger cats today, I have to just play rhythm because I can't, when I solo, I take it too far out. They don't know what to do. And I just, that's kind of a lost art in some ways.
Oh, yeah, I think you're probably right. Well, I think that the age of YouTube and Instagram, it's like everyone takes their moment to shine, and they're rarely sitting there playing rhythm, on one.
But it's the most intoxicating thing.
Right, right. Well, you know, it's funny 'cause I'm a dad now,
Yeah.
and like
Congratulations.
thank you. I think about, you know, I play music with my kid all the time, even though he's only a year old.
Oh,
He's
it's
like
great.
always
Oh,
banging on drums,
yeah.
he's playing on guitars and stuff like that. But like when I was a kid, you know, my dad was not a professional musician, but when I learned to play, one of the funny things I always remember was he would make me play rhythm and he would solo because he
Wow.
loved to solo. That was his thing. He had this great knack for like melodies, and he'd play piano and mandolin, and
Wow.
I would play rhythm for like, you know, a long period of time. And now that I'm looking back, I look back at it, he was probably like smoking a little weed and be like, all right, play some rhythm and I'll solo. And then I'm like, you know, and then I would ask him eventually, like, hey, you know, why can't I ever solo? He's like, well, when you have a kid, he can play rhythm and you can solo. So I'm prepping for that
He
now.
got him going, man. He's going to be having to keep that Freddie Green rhythm
Yeah,
going, man.
yeah, but I think also part of it was like you got to learn how to like hold it down, you know. And I wish that I had sang more and played rhythm back then because that's something that I get so focused in my rhythm playing when I do it that it's hard for me to sing. So
Hmm.
I've never been like a great like combining my rhythm playing and my singing. Like my when I'm singing, my rhythm playing has to get very simplified, you know,
Interesting.
versus like you
Yeah.
hear some guys just ripping guitar while singing. I mean, I'm good at like playing lines as I'm singing or even counter lines, but holding like a really like a complicated rhythm while I'm singing is hard for me. I listen to Prince and I'm like, oh my God, he's playing all these syncopated rhythms and singing at the same time. I'm like, how the hell did he do that?
Well, I mean, that's the bar is pretty high with Prince, I think. I mean,
Yeah,
but it's
or
true. Yeah.
the guys that play like bass, like really complicated bass lines and sing. I'm like, I just that's so hard to me. I kind of need to like, and to be totally honest, when I stop playing it all together and sing, my singing improves dramatically. Like, you know, because I'm still thinking about it. I'm still thinking about, okay, I gotta like to hit this note, I really gotta like breathe right here, and I gotta like push right there, you know. And if I once I like stop, you know, it's hard for me to do all of that at the same time.
Maybe,
Uh,
maybe it'll just over time that's
yeah, I
something
think
that
it will. And then there's certain song. It's like the songs I've been playing longer are easier. So I mean, it's one of those things where it's just doing it more and more and more.
what I, I just want you to talk about to younger cats or just in general people that Kraz, you know, it's like you have um, played some shows during the pandemic. It feels like, well, I mean, you just look at places like Terrapin Crossroads have been forced to close. A lot of bands that were sort of on a certain domestic touring circuit have probably have to go down a couple of notches just because um, the infrastructure may not be there. For what would you say to people that, I mean, you have a lot of stick to itiveness. You've chosen not to be that guy, like making a lot of dough in a pop band, doing stuff you don't, you know, that doesn't cater to what you get off on. You've done your own stuff. You're putting yourself out there. You're going on tour. And yet a lot of younger cats um, look at the situation. I just feel like I don't want to I don't want a lot of cats, very good, successful, talented cats to walk away from music. And I worry about that. And I
Yeah.
just wanted you to talk a little bit about what your inspiration to these people would be who are in darkness, who maybe played 100 something shows a year and they've played 12 this year, or they've played nothing, or they don't see the light. And I just want you to talk to them about why it's important to stay with what you believe is your purpose in this life.
Well, I think there's a couple things that I would say to that. You know, one thing is that, you know, having music in your life is such a huge blessing, you know. And I think it needs to be nurtured. You know what I mean?
Sure.
I think like you know, one of some of the things that I get scared thinking about the future uh sometimes talking to my nieces, and you know, I knowing that I had um musical education and access to all this music when I was a kid. And of course people do have access, but it's not, the
I mean, let's face it, Aaron Magner, and you probably did something. I mean, he left UPenn to go on tour with the Disco Biscuits and didn't graduate. I mean, that's pretty
Right,
insane.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that story is, no one I know graduated Berkeley really.
Exactly. That doesn't
But
exist. Yeah.
yeah. So, it's an interesting question, but what I'll say is that like every musician has a voice. And like, what we've talked about Hendrix and Dylan and all these different things, and because you are not having success in this moment, or I hate to even use the word success, but those guys kept pushing through. And that was the thing, that made them these like iconic influential artists, and that can happen anywhere, you know what I mean, that they're in oftentimes it is the person who you least expected it from, you know what I mean, and it's this person. It's true though.
I
It's
dig.
like
I'm laughing because it's
the
true,
most
man. I dig.
the most interesting music is someone that like didn't sing great and didn't rip guitar, that figured out some other sort of expression. Like that's what changes the scope of music. That's what changes the scope of art, is someone who didn't have it easy. You know what I mean? Because like you see these guys who just are such rippers, and I love that too. I love like seeing these young kids that can just rip anything they want. Um, but like those imperfections and the weirdness is kind of what's cool, so like, and you find those in different ways. I guess what I'm trying to get at is like, don't compare. It goes back to the first thing we said. Don't compare yourself to anyone else. Just do what makes you get off. You know what I mean? And that's really going to inspire other people. And also, I think will in turn create a sort of success. That the success doesn't have to mean
Well, no,
riches,
let's be very
riches
clear.
and fame.
I think that's one of the issues. That word in the Western lexicon, I consider success being the ability to cut above the morass of what anybody else is doing and being unique and being, having an individual voice, whether it's in broadcasting or on the bandstand. It has nothing to do with commodification or money, I mean, to me, if I can put food on the table for my kids, I can pay the bills and I can go see music and have that as part of my life. That's success. I mean, that's what it is.
Oh, I mean, that's the ultimate success.
Yeah.
Because if you see success as something, it's funny because I talk about that with people, people that don't know me, that just know I'm a musician, which is a lot, like in my neighborhood, people. It's funny because when I lived in Brooklyn, people knew who I was for some reason, or they knew what I did. You know what I mean? It was not because I was famous. They were just like, oh, that's Kras. He's in what's it called? Blah, 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 blah. In Pasadena, like no one knows what the hell. What they don't even know the scene. They've never even heard of what I do,
Right.
So like, to me, when they ask me to go deeper on what I do, they're like, wait, sir, who's famous that you do something with? And like, I'm like, well, I don't even want to explain it, because
there's no reason to, it's so interesting.
But the basic way I get to explain it, which really kind of puts into scope how lucky I am, is as I say, well, I make a decent living. I have for my family. I get to make music I want to do. And when I go to the grocery store, no one gives a shit. You know what I mean? When I
go to Trader Joe's.
The most incredible thing that could happen is if I walked into a Guitar Center, there'd probably be like one person that would be like, Kras, I love you, man. And that might happen. Back in New York, restaurants or in certain places, people would. But again, it would be like a guitar player that fucking had had my guitar or something, or like someone that was a fan of Soul Live who what's funny is that 90% of the people that do that, I could like have a meal with, and I'd probably really like that person. You know what I mean?
Right.
Which is actually great. That's a
It
beautiful thing.
Yeah.
There's nothing better than that. If I reached like pop success, where the people bothering me, I probably wouldn't like them. I shouldn't say that. I shouldn't say probably wouldn't like them, but you know what I'm saying? It's
Totally.
like I feel when I describe it to somebody who is not aware of what I do, it makes me smile because I'm like, you know what, it's pretty great, you know.
I will say,
So
man, I think I just feel out of this, well, I mean, I'm not basing it on any quantifiable data, but I think at some point in your not too distant future, you will have to, you will be, I don't know what the right word is, but you're going to become very commercially successful. And that's where the rubber meets the road again, to not just stay inspired, but be able to keep both feet on the ground. I mean, I think one thing, without knowing you incredibly well, is that you're authentically very humble person. And I just think that that is the most important thing moving forward, is just staying completely humble no matter what the situation. And almost, but I do feel like you're going to have to deal with some of this commerciality coming soon, because, and I mean, I don't know how many years or months, but it's coming, and it might bring a lot of money, but it'll be interesting to see as we move forward, how to retain and cultivate happiness, because I just know a lot of musicians I know a lot that are totally at peace too, but I know a lot that are very successful financially, and they're pretty miserable people.
right. Well, I think the big difference there, and I
Not that you're
will
starving to death or anything.
no, no, no.
Yeah.
I mean, what I will say though is that, at a younger age, I don't, I mean, who knows what kind of commercial success will happen. I mean, I don't doubt that. I'm pretty confident that I'll continue to make a living, which is great, and to be able to make records and keep doing what I'm doing. But I will say that, like, having if commercial
Yes.
commercial
Yes.
sex
Yes. Sex.
commercial success happens at my age, I mean, it's pretty easy to deal with at that point, or not easy, but you look at people in my age group. John Mayer is probably a good example, but like, he had a lot of success at a young age, and then now it took him till now to, like, figure out how to translate that into happiness.
Wow.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, I
And it's
did.
like,
Yeah.
but now, what am I really gonna do? It's like, what am I really gonna do? Go out there and, it's like, at this point, like, I might, like, buy a property somewhere where I can, like, go farm something. But, like, that's the most extravagant thing I'm gonna do.
Oh,
Whereas if
buy
I'm
buy buy a
at
farm,
25
buy a
years
barn.
old,
Yeah,
yeah,
bring the
that's
assembly.
what I'm
Bring
saying.
the assembly in, man. Bring the
That's
assembly
what
into the barn.
I'm just gonna make the things that I want to achieve, like, easier and more comfortable to achieve, and, like, have some cool experiences for my family to have. But, like, other than that, like, what do I really need or want? I don't really know. I don't need a Ferrari, or, it's like, so I think when I was like 25,
Yeah.
maybe I would have bought some stupid shit. But
Well, I just feel like
or
it's more
done some
like
stupid shit.
the idea of, like, just not being able to go to Trader Joe's and shop, or like
Oh,
feel
yeah,
like,
yeah. I
like,
don't think that. I don't know. Also, what's interesting is some of that is how you deal with it. I mean, and
hmm,
because there's guys like Dave Matthews who, like, you would say is famous. I mean, I guess he was, I don't know, whatever.
his
Maybe he was more famous
name
before.
recognition,
Yeah,
absolutely.
but I've been with him in various situations, and he doesn't. No one gives a shit. I mean, really.
I
You
love it.
know,
Yeah, I love it.
like, and I even Mayer now. I mean, I guess it is, but, like, I've hung out with him a few times. Like, back in the day, he used to be like, okay, we got to find a place with a back entrance and thing, and this, that, and the other. And he probably still does do that. Actually, I don't really know, but there, I think it depends how you, like, I think now he knows how to keep himself out of the headlines. Back then, he was, like, all about keeping himself in the headlines, you know. And, like, I guess my other point is, like, if you walk around with a bunch of bodyguards and shit, you're gonna create attention, you know.
Absolutely. Absolutely,
But
man.
so yes, I guess what I'm trying to say is, like, I don't think I'll ever get to the point where it's not manageable and totally fine. And I think part of, like, the great thing about making music I want to make all the time is that the people that like it are probably people that I like.
That's
So
really, I
it
mean,
goes
and then
hand in
you know what,
hand.
it's like, if you are enjoying it and having fun and making music that you like, not only, I mean, you clearly have your posse of musicians. People are going to want to play with you, and people are going to want to come check it out. And I don't know. I give you a lot of props, man. I mean, I do feel like I don't know if you agree or not, but I just feel like there is no, whatever playbook there was before or roadmap, to domestic touring, there is not anymore. And I just think that what you're doing, in the new year and sort of making it a review, is cool. And just doing it, just do it, baby. I never thought I'd be quoting Andre Agassi, but it's like,
Yeah.
like really, like I just feel like people need to experiment, and obviously there needs to be some sort of apparatus in place. But I give you a lot of props for creating this I mean, the music feels good and it's danceable, and you are appealing to a younger, you're not, I mean, the lack of attention span, but these are groovy tunes, and the lyrics pull you in. And I don't know, man, just keep happening, man. And like Pat said, try to, in those moments of frustration, just be here now and just appreciate all the blessings that we have,
Yeah, yeah. That was a really cool clip of Pat. I want to listen to that whole interview.
I'll send you
Yeah.
some legendary stuff. But Kraz, happy
Yeah.
Hanukkah, man. We'll
Yeah, happy Hanukkah, my
and
friend.
I'll try to. I mean, I just don't understand why Arizona always gets dissed on the touring circuits.
We actually had a Phoenix date, and then it fell through because it was hard to route it with everything we had.
Of course, we just get
Yeah.
we're just like neglected stepchild. But
I think we tried to do like Phoenix and Albuquerque, and then it was just like it was to drive out there was going to be. It was just like it was a little out of the. It was hard to make it work. It's hard to make it work.
Hey, man,
But-
I'm going to try to make Pappies, but let's do
Yeah, I
another
love
interview in the new
Pappies.
year, man. It was great to hang.
Yeah, absolutely. Anytime, man. Anytime.
All right, much love
Absolutely.
to you, brother.
You too, man. Take
Peace.
care.
Later.